I'm George McKeever with Calvin Community. And Calvin Community is a faith-based, not-for-profit retirement community with a continuum of care. So we have lots of different levels of care. We're located in the Beaverdale neighborhood. One of those levels of care is dementia care. And that, of course, is our subject for this series. As part of our mission to serve older adults, we have partnered with other community experts to deliver this Embrace Aging series. We've had 5 sessions. They are designed to be for the providers, the patients, and families focused on Alzheimer's and dementia. This week we have licensed social worker Jake Lee. In a few weeks we will have the final session. That'll be April 18th at 7 p.m. here on Tuesday. And we'll have Ann Basting talk about the power of the arts to improve our well-being and dealing with dementia. Now, I want to thank you to the American Enterprise Group for underwriting this whole series. Thanks also to the Alzheimer's Association, Arbor Springs, Broadlawns Geriatric and Memory Center, the Hale Group, Syverson, Strege and Financial Company, Des Moines Pastoral Counseling Center, and Polk County, of course, for sharing their expertise. Thanks to DMU for hosting here. And if you would like to catch up with the other sessions that we've had, and even last year's, then see Calvin Community on Facebook, and for sure see the calvincommunity.org. And you can see what are reduced to 30 or 40-minute sessions. They're just remarkable. Now today, Jake Lee is a licensed independent social worker and holds a Master's of Social Work degree from the University of Michigan. Jake provides therapy for adults and couples. He specializes in treating post-traumatic stress disorder, like PTSD, anxiety, and mood disorders, and adjustment disorders. As a 24-year Air Force veteran, Jake has interest in working with military members and their families with transition challenges and coping with the long-term effects of military service. He's also interested in working with people experiencing life transition issues, including those related to school, relationships, family stressors, as well as sexual and gender identity. Jake is a member of the National Association of Social Workers and a life member of the Veterans of Foreign Wars. When not at work, Jake can be found in a mountain of books, or pursuing his PhD, or relaxing with video games. So I give you here Jake Lee. Thank you all.
All right, can you guys hear me? Okay, this is my first test of this equipment, so hopefully somebody will wave at me if I don't get it right. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. Thank you, Ken, for talking me into this. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you about this. And what I'm going to talk to you about for a few minutes is going to be about a way to perhaps look at this transition in life. And to do so, not only if you're the person with the diagnosis, but also for caregivers and other family members, to be able to do it with compassion and with some mindfulness. So we're going to talk a little bit about, what we're going to think about along the lines of the Alzheimer's disease, specifically the different stages, just so that we understand, if you're not familiar with them yet, what they can be going through. Those who have dementia are going to teach us a whole new way of being with each other. They may require more support than we're able to provide. And the disease presents itself slightly different in each individual, but there are also some commonalities. And those commonalities will be the ones that you'll see up on the screen. We're going to use compassion as a lens from which to see this world. And I'm going to talk to you a little bit about how we can change our perspective from the idea of what we thought life will be upon diagnosis to what life will be. So as we kind of look at this, these are the different sections that I'm going to kind of break down some of the symptoms in. But I think the most important thing to draw from these next 3 slides is the fact that the person with the diagnosis, their ability to appreciate, to respond, and to express feelings is not diminished. And it's that person that we hope to reach. Also, we want to be able to think about the caregiver and about the extended family around them, because change not only happens to those that are diagnosed, but also happens to the entire family network. So at stage 1, or perhaps diagnosis, depending on when the family finds out, the first change in perspective begins. We can also consider this the grieving of the loss of who we thought or expected we were going to be. Additionally, physical and mental abilities may begin to decline, further causing distress and grief. Caregivers and family members are now going to be first faced with the realization that their lives are going to be changed. So by stage 2, careers can or may be disrupted. Family continuity may be disrupted. You know, the way of life is continuing to change at this point. And it's not just the physical issues and not just the financial issues, although those are huge burdens that are going to be faced, but also the emotions. So we look here at the list: personality change, confusion, anxiety, paranoia, sadness and depression, perhaps hostility and aggression. And many of these emotions are due to still holding on to this idea of this is who I was going to be. I spent my entire life. So, like for me, as you heard, I retired from the military. And so I had this idea of what my military retirement was going to look like. I'm happy to say, and also shocked to say, that it is absolutely nothing like I expected it to be. For me, it was a transition and an acknowledgement that I had PTSD. For people with dementia and Alzheimer's and for their family members, it's the idea that that retirement and what that looked like no longer exists. And now I have to face a new reality. By stage 3, we go through another grieving process. Again, with each stage, there comes the realization and the experience of what it actually is versus what we might have thought it would be. Much of this dissonance between what we think is going to happen and what actually happens can be from a variety of things. What education did we kind of put ourselves through in order to understand the disease and what it might mean for us? What do we hold on as far as expectations or assumptions about what life I could still hold on to, or what life as a family member I was still going to expect to be able to have with this family member? And so with each stage comes a new grieving, realizing that as you get to this point, wow, so this is what it looks like. This is what it means for me. This is how hard it is for a spouse who perhaps didn't have to hold a job to suddenly hold a job and be a caregiver. The majority of caregivers in the United States are family members. And so if it was a 2-income family, does a caregiver decide to work 2 jobs to maintain the financial resources that are going to be necessary in order to care for their loved one? Or are going to take only one job and be more present. Each family is going to have to go through this on their own. And with the support of the resources and the networks like this that are around them. So what we're really talking about is how can we expand our ability to endure? So I'd like to spend a few minutes discussing compassion and mindfulness as a way to combat internal expectations of what life was supposed to be for both the patient and the caregiver, and to reduce depression, anxiety, and grief in this journey. Compassion not only for those with the diagnosis, but just as importantly, for the entire team that will be supporting that person. So we may give ourselves and our partners appreciation for the remaining strengths. And there are remaining strengths. The awareness of memory and emotions, the ability to use their senses, the ability to remember well-learned skills, some long-term memory, their sense of humor, music appreciation. Okay. Is it this one? Okay, now I'm gonna. So one of the things I talk about with a lot of my clients is this idea that some of the greatest challenges that we face aren't your fault. Things happen. From the mundane, getting a ticket or a flat tire as I'm trying to come up here. It's not my fault, but it is a bump along my road. And so how do I deal with it? There is pain and suffering in life, but we can have the wisdom to not blame ourselves. And this is something that I see particularly with caregivers. I should have done more. I should have taken the second job because we ran out of resources by stage 3 and it was just awful and it tore at my heart. Or I should have cooked more meals, or I should have had more friends and then they could have helped me. The list goes on and on. But it's the idea that we did the very best that we could at that moment in time, and we're going to do the very best that we can today. And reaching out for help means that we're just going to learn new skills, new ways of coping that might help us do even better. So what we're talking about is flexibility, empathy, and responsiveness, so that not only we, but those that we care for can be at their healthiest. I don't want to try to paint too rosy of a picture. This is an incredibly challenging time in the patient's life and in those who have to care for them. But there are also ways that we can help them to do better, and for us to be able to do better in supporting them. And the vehicle that I'm going to talk to you about today to do that is through compassion and mindfulness. And it's this idea of stepping out of the autopilot of our life. Now, maybe those of you in the audience are perhaps maybe more mindful than I was. But I can recall about 15 years of my 24 years in the military being pretty much on autopilot. Things were kind of laid out in front of me, expectations were laid out in front of me, and I sort of did them. But there's another way that we can look at our lives, another way that we can look at the individual days of our lives, and that's to live more intentionally. So I have a little thing. I hope all of you enjoy M&Ms or can eat M&Ms. If not, hopefully through the experience of others and those around you, you'll be able to catch a little bit about what mindfulness might be. So I brought treats. Ellery, I'm going to hand you a bag. If you will just take one bag of M&Ms and then pass it down. And I'll start over here. I tried to count. They actually don't tell you how many bags are in here. But they do tell you that there are you can have 3 servings for 190 calories, and there are 8 servings in there. So I went 3 times 8 is 24, and 50 people, that should be about right. So if we run out of bags, please share. Now I'm going to ask you to hold on to the bag of M&Ms, but not to open them up yet. Of course, I already see somebody chewing. I think they already started eating the M&Ms, and that's fine. As long as you save at least one. So while you guys are waiting to get your M&Ms, I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're going to do. So please don't do this yet. As I tell the patients that I talk to individually, I'm going to give you the instructions first, and then those that would like to participate will get a chance to experience perhaps a little more mindful way of eating a single M&M. Now, if you guys are like me, I tend to eat 2 or 3 at a time. There's one guy that I used to work with. He was a volunteer, and he would always come into my office and say, "Jake, do you have candy?" "Yeah, I have candy. Would you?" And I would hold up a huge bottle of M&Ms, and he would grab a whole handful. I was like, "Now, eat them mindfully." And he would just take the whole thing, put them in his mouth, and 30 seconds later, they're all gone. This is going to be a little different. Okay, so does everybody have their M&M? And I do apologize for those that are watching online. You'll have to use your own M&Ms at some point to try this out. So you're going to take a single M&M out. And what I want you to do is you're going to use all of your senses except perhaps sight, since you won't be able to see it. I want you to place the M&M on your tongue, close your eyes, and just experience it as it melts in your mouth. Do not chew it. Do not smush it. Do not do any of the things you normally do with an M&M. And just catalog the experiences that you get from that M&M. Oop. It has wheels. As you finish, open up your eyes, raise your hand to let me know that you're done. Okay, would somebody like to volunteer one experience? Smell. What did you guys smell? Okay. Sweetness. Good. Anybody else? Smell chocolate. Yeah. When the M&M was first in your mouth, what did you feel? Yes. Second stage of the M&M, as it started to melt. Anybody? Roughness. Yes. What did you say? Soft. Okay. And then the explosion of chocolate caused, what did you taste? The candy went away. And you, oh, yes. Yeah. Ah, okay. That's a unique experience, and I've done this a lot, so good. Okay. Now, I've done this with individuals, and I've timed it. It takes 6 minutes for a single M&M to melt in your mouth, roughly. Now compare that to my friend who'd just take a whole handful and shove them in his mouth. That is mindfulness. The ability to turn all of your senses onto a single focus and to be present with it. And we can do this with all sorts of things. Both those things that we deem or expect are positive, and also those things that might not be so positive. I use this for pain. By focusing on my pain, I'm actually able to separate myself from it. And I can feel the texture, almost the taste of what that pain is like. And I can differentiate that pain from other pain that I might have. And when I do that, all of a sudden, it doesn't have a hold on me. It doesn't cause me to become grouchy for the entire day or for however long that pain happens to last. And that's what we mean by intentional. And so we use mindfulness to understand arising thoughts, emotions, and body sensations. What are your experiences with mindfulness? Have you guys ever experienced any other types of mindfulness? One that came to mind to me was when I was in a car accident. A guy hit me from behind at about 40 miles an hour, and I was at a stoplight. And for a brief instant, maybe 1/10 of a second, I saw everything slow down. I saw all the stuff in my little glove compartment that I'd organized so well just come flying out of it in slow motion. And then all of a sudden, boom, everything kind of returns back to speed. It's like a rubber band effect. That is hyper-mindfulness. So another thing that I talk to my clients about is the idea that things happen to us, right? The experiences in the world happen to us, right? Like talk to you about the flat tire or putting the M&M in your mouth. That's the event. That's the experience. And then our brain thinks about it. I wonder what this experience means for me, which then creates emotions once we understand that. And then usually we just have an automatic response. My wife decides to chastise me for forgetting to walk the dog. I think about it. She's mad at me. My emotion is I'm mad at her. And then the reaction is I go down into the basement and hide for a while. But events are neutral. Her telling me this stuff might be just as much about her having a bad day, and that was just a little thing that kind of put her on edge, and then she just blurted it all out. And I have internal ideas, too, about being yelled at. Perhaps my dad constantly yelled at me when I was a kid. And so hearing that yelling was just a trigger that sent me off, created emotion of fear, and then I hid in my basement, which is my own stuff. It's not my wife. My wife's not responsible for my emotions. I am. And so being mindful is understanding what these sensations are that are happening around us and within us. And then be able to delineate, how do I want to intentionally react to this? So, full disclosure, we talked about the Moines Pastoral Counseling Center as being a counseling center that also includes the spiritual component in the lives of our clients. I'm Buddhist. So when we think about spiritual needs, it might not just be that we're Christian or that we're Jewish. It could be Buddhist. And so part of this is understanding there's many different ways that we can meditate, and there's many different ways that we can be mindful. I'm going to show you just one. And for me, my meditation practice is a practice in mindfulness in a controlled environment, where instead of focusing on the M&M like I gave you, I focus on my breath. And through that experience in a controlled environment, which is quiet, which is safe, with the minimalist of external sensations that are happening around me, I practice focusing on my breath. And then that translates to being here today. I have to tell you, I have a huge fear of talking in front of people. I don't know why. I'm still trying to reach that level of sensation to understand why I have a fear of talking in front of people. And so I've been meditating for several days about, hey, Jake, what's this about? They don't have pitchforks and knives. They're not going to rush you on the stage and slice you into little bitty pieces. And so I recognize that that's my own stuff. And here I am. For those with dementia, it's about, what am I feeling right now? We talk a lot about the irritability and the anger that sometimes we find are present with those who have the diagnosis. And for those of us who are caregivers, are they mad at us? What are they mad at? Are they mad at the nurse that didn't provide what they needed? Are they mad because I didn't get the right bologna at the grocery store? Are they mad? We don't know. We have to be mindful about what part of this is our stuff. Have I had a bad day? Did my boss piss me off because I couldn't work overtime because I had to come home? I had to make sure that I began the caregiving routine that I had set up? Or was it that the person lost their usual way of communicating? Couldn't remember what it was that they wanted to say, couldn't remember what was irritating them, but they still have that irritating emotion within them. And needed to just let it go. Needed you to be able to hold on to it so that they can reduce their anxiety. So what I teach my clients is, in about 5 weeks, I teach them what mindfulness is, and I begin to teach them how to meditate so that they can increase their skill level in mindfulness. And in each week and each group of weeks, their focus changes from focusing on their breath to the next level, focusing or scanning their body, feeling the itch that's in their back that they can't scratch. Do they need to move to scratch it, or can they just be present as a container and hold on to that sensation? Does it really itch the whole time until you scratch it, or does it disappear? And that's kind of living inside our heads. We kind of move to that area. And then later on, we can start then analyzing the areas in our life that perhaps took more time than I had at that moment to be able to focus on. Why did I have a flat tire? I'm still irritated about the flat tire I had. I don't know why. So tonight, as I meditate, I might think about that. Where is the source of my irritation? Where is the source of this anger that is coming within me? Is it internal? Is it my stuff? Because the real question we want to ask is, how can I best take care of myself and those loved ones that I'm in charge of? And this seems like a very experienced group, but in case there's somebody who hasn't quite delineated this fact yet. Taking care of yourself as a caregiver is just as important as the care you provide to your loved one. Because if you can't take care of yourself, you're not going to be able to last the marathon that it's going to take to be able to care for them. And I can't stress that enough. Again, thank you very much. I'm going to wait for questions. I'm hoping somebody's going to wave their hand to let me know how I'm supposed to do that. Does anybody here have any questions? Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
What about the patient? Is there anything that, and I know that it will reflect in how we interact with the patient, is there anything that we can help encourage the patient to do?
Okay. Okay, if you don't mind, I'm just going to shorten it because I have to repeat the question to those who aren't here. So the question is, it sounds like what you're telling us, Jake, is we can practice this now before we get into a situation like this. And part two, how do we help those with the diagnosis? Because they might be in the middle of the progression of the disease. Yeah. If you don't have the diagnosis now, if you just want to have a more mindful life, you can practice it now. I use it with clients all the time for anxiety and depression, for dealing with changes, large changes in their life. It also doesn't take but if you have the diagnosis, just like I had PTSD, and I had it for several years, and I began to learn how to use this skill as a way to reduce my anxiety, reduce my triggers.
What if you're in the middle of that kind of a crisis or tension?
Mm-hmm.
If you've already practiced, you might be able to breathe through it. But for someone who's in one of those panic situations or really intense, how can you help them?
Well, if they're in that much distress, so there's a part of the right side of the brain that's actually a switch that can turn off the hyperactivity because you're actually what we call living in the emotional brain. So, yeah, I would help them to learn how to breathe through it. And most of the people who come to see me regularly are those people that are in distress, and I'm able to teach them that. Yeah. Any other questions?
Jake, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
If you're working with a client, and let's say she is a caregiver for a husband who has dementia, and you see them over the course of a couple of months, and then a few months go by and they're not calling you for a new appointment or haven't shown up for the next appointment. Do you feel that you're often in a situation where you're arming your clients with where to go next to perhaps get some more help? Are you turning, are there specific agencies, or shall we say you can refer them to a caregiving agency or two to kind of bolster their support once a week or twice a week?
Yeah, so, we talked a little bit about the resources, right, that are available. A lot of times clients and their families don't look up those resources until the diagnosis hits them. So yes, part of, I think, the initial exploration into, what's going on with them is kind of separating out, okay, what kind of resources do they need? What kind of supports do they need? What's already available either in the community and or within the individual and their family? And then more specifically, how can I, as a therapist, help in my own small way to increase that support?
Very good.
And I welcome you to send me a list of what you've got, because I'm always looking for more resources.
Fine, very good.
Okay. Well, mindfulness is and meditation has become fairly ubiquitous now. I think it started late 80s, early 90s. I think it began to show up. There's compassion-based cognitive behavior therapy that clients used. Seeing your pastor or your spiritual leader can be a way to practice mindfulness. Remember, I'm a Buddhist, but that doesn't mean that these skills aren't also in Catholicism or in other Christian denominations. Prayer is meditation in a different way. So, yeah, Terry. Terry works with us. Yeah, that's Allison, right? Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Mm-hmm. And then Eric Deshawn, who had a class with us, he also does a mindfulness and meditation half-day retreat once a month. And that's at the New Land campus on Hickman and, what is that, 86th? Pure Land, yes. Yes, ma'am.
I can offer, there are classes at the college at massage at the Pure Land Center on the owner.
Oh, okay.
And we're near Veterans Hospital. It's mostly for beginners.
Okay.
Because sometimes it's hard to get into. There's all kinds of places where they have groups, but it's like, what if I don't know how? So we sort of specialize in helping people know how to start.
Okay. Yeah, I found out that because I get massage therapy, and I found out that being more mindful means my 1 hour massage therapy feels a lot longer, which is really nice. I thank you, everybody. Seeing all of you here today interested in how we can support and help. Yes?
I have a question.
Okay.
So many of us, you made the comment earlier, you really don't act. You sort of hit this in the head.
Mm.
Like that.
Mhm.
So my question is, so many of us will wind up in a third of a role by the wind up with how do we start to get ourselves to a point where we actually understand that it would lead to our longer term benefit to start to take these steps before we actually do it? Any great advice on that?
I would be wealthy beyond the dreams of avarice if I knew the answer to that. I would say, however, that being more mindful about the present, being able to let go of some of the attachments that we have, not only to things, but to certain ideas of, like I said, what our life will be like, what our experience will be like, what grad school will be like. For those of you that are students that are here today, you have expectations of what each class is going to be like, what each semester is going to be like, and ultimately what this whole experience is supposed to give you at the end. And that can create a lot of misery and a lot of suffering, because rarely are we that forward-thinking, future-seeing, that we know exactly how it's going to turn out. Except maybe my sister, I think she has a very freaky way of knowing exactly what's going to happen. So by letting go of those expectations, by letting go of that attachment to what we think the end result is going to be like, then we can be more present in the moment, just experience whatever bump there's going to be without adding more bumps ourselves. There's a word in, I think, the Pali language, I'd like to say. Please don't quote me on that, although now it's on recording. It's called dukkha, and it's the suffering that we can experience in life. But if I remember right, do is the hole in the wheel of like an ox cart, and so dukkha means an axle that doesn't fit quite well. And so you can imagine if you have an axle with this wheel that doesn't fit quite well, you not only have the bumps in life, but you have these remaining bumps that keep on going and going and going. And that's what they mean by suffering, right? So not only am I anxious about giving this talk today, but for the entire week before it, I was suffering because I wasn't just able to let go of that expectation of what I had of what this experience was going to be like. This experience has been fantastic. And so part of reducing the suffering, part of being able to be prepared for that moment is learning to just take the bumps and don't add any more.
And just like the M&M that was just starting to let out its aroma and getting closer to cracking and releasing the chocolate, the day-to-day has lots of bumps and grinds at one day to the next, but there's wonderful possibilities, one time out of 5 of those, if we're not conscious of listening for it.
Exactly. Yeah. The experience of just enjoying an M&M for 6 minutes instead of 6 of them in a minute.
And the same kind of mindfulness will get you thinking that I'm caring for my husband, but I'm realizing my daughter's husband now has knee surgery, in need of that because he's working double time because his wife is attending you and your husband. The caregiving team has changes down the line, and
sure.
If you're more conscious of it,
and how to be able to separate. Yeah, and how to be able to separate what is his stuff, what is the stuff he's going to be working on, and what am I able to affect that can support, right? And that's the compassion piece. Not only do I have compassion for the person who's suffering through the diagnosis, but compassion for those other members around them. And then when we see that, we're able to then talk to them in a more mindful way, ally with them, and support them. I found through this experience of meditation and mindfulness that when I look at people who are mad at the checkout line in front of me, I no longer get mad or frustrated or judgmental, but I just have compassion. Wow, he's suffering a lot. And it changes my whole perspective on then what that experience is like. Yes, sir. Okay.
But there's still the response to the thing.
Okay.
Can you walk us through the moment when it's going badly and you need to be able to deal with it properly?
Okay. So the question is, okay, Jake, this is all well and good in theory, but if I'm faced with the moment right in front of my face, how the heck do I deal with it? Like I said, it's the challenge is tough. There's nothing that's going to remove how tough that situation is. But I can make decisions if I'm not hyperactivated, right? And for those of you who have any kind of exposure to neuroscience understands that at the point in which we're hyperactivated, our frontal lobe shuts down because, well, we're not going to need to think. We're going to need to run because the lion's going to eat us. And that's kind of how our system got developed. But it doesn't know that what's really causing me to think my life is over is the fact that I lost my job or that I got this diagnosis. And so, one, I have to be conscious, be aware in the moment. Am I hyperactivated? Yeah, it's breathe. Help. Let me use that little switch that's in the right side of my frontal lobe to kind of shut off this thing. So if I can breathe, then my brain says, oh, maybe there isn't a lion trying to eat you. Okay, well, he's still breathing normally, and let's turn down the heart rate and let's get down. And then now our thinking brain comes back online. And now we're able to, okay, what did Jake say? Okay, so I should be able to analyze this thing, right? Take a look at this. Because a lot of these skills that we teach require our thinking brain to be activated, right? Require the language center to be activated. So, yeah, I have to get myself out of hyperactivity in order to be able to do that. Okay. There. One more? Okay.
One of my good friends used to be diagnosed with disease. He usually shows up after the day. His wife will be the caregiver. Is it too late for someone with early diagnosis to actually be taught mindfulness as a mechanism for beginning to cope with the fact that you're going to be going through a relatively long stage? Where things will go from bad to worse over a period of time. Will it be helpful to both? I can see how it'd be helpful to the caregiver. Because there's no question in my mind, from my own experience, that you experience the guilt. How do you separate yourself away from weight? Not you.
It's the disease,
It's the
right?
disease that's working in
Right.
But with the patient, can you, at an early stage, would it be helpful for that person's life over the next number of years as the disease progresses?
I wouldn't even know how to quantify that. I would say if it's something that they want to do, if it's a way to continue the conversation, the communication, continue their activity and learning a new skill, by all means. But the environment that they then are in, because their caregiver and their family members are able to be more mindful, more compassionate, more understanding, and more patient, creates a better atmosphere for them. No. Otherwise, I would have a book out, and I would be, yeah.
I was listening to that gentleman, and my father is having a lot of this. But one of your other slides talked about emotions. And so what I'm kind of gathering that you're saying is, I am going to have emotions, but when I start to go, feel it, and just say to myself, this is where I need to pull out that compassion. You know, to just, okay, my heart's starting to race, I'm starting to, and if I escalate, he escalates, and I need to de-escalate. And we all kind of have some of those feelings that you can, and I'm just trying to catch them sooner so that I can de-escalate myself. Is that, and whether you say breathe or
Whatever works for you.
yeah, you know, just like this compassion, you know, this isn't his fault.
Right.
And such.
Yes.
And I think even at, like he said, to try to talk with him about, you know, you said your body was shaking. Let's just sit down. You know, let's sit down, let's just breathe, let me get you some water.
And that sounds really tough. I'm sorry you're going through that right now. Can I offer you some water? I think one of the biggest things that we forget to do too is, for as much as they're able to, ask them, how can I help you? You know, a lot of times in the caregiving role, we tend to assume, what do they need now? Oh, they probably need to eat, or if they're able to, and communication does become more and more problematic, ask them.
Because don't you sense of your PTSD, can you sense in your body when, oh, I'm in an environment this isn't working?
Yeah, you know, that's interesting. Thank you for asking that. When I first started, I would get triggered all the time and not really know sometimes what these really subtle sensations were that were triggering me. Now, like right now, I feel the neck muscles and the upper shoulder muscles are really tight. And so I'm triggered. There is a sense of not being quite safe. But I recognize that it's my own anxiety about speaking in front of you and not that there really is a safety concern. So yeah, I have, later on I'll talk to myself again, and I'll probably will meditate a little bit and try to relax and reframe the experience as I'm doing kind of in between of talking to people right now.